The film begins with Lin Dewey, a man who lives in the desert with his pals. Dewey is one of several swordsmen hired by city officials to assassinate the sadistic killer. When they discovered the target, they swiftly surrounded him. His allies assaulted the man one by one, but they all failed, until Dewey stepped up and stabbed his sword into the man's neck. Soon after, a man named Butu appeared. He leads the Dewey swordsman squad. When he noticed the man was encircled, he instantly hit him with an arrow. However, Butu never loved sword fighting, despite the fact that they endangered their lives every time they carried out their duty. He even directed others to dispose of the bodies of the 6 victims who perished without regard. Several years ago, Dewey was a skilled swordsman. He moved from place to practice his sword abilities. Dewey once encountered a beautiful woman named Wanyu, who was being bullied by goons. Dewey jumped in to help her right away. Following that meeting, Dewey and Wanyu grew to like each other and wanted to marry. They were blessed with a daughter, Ping-er. Dewey began attempting to abandon his profession as a swordsman after marrying in order to live a normal life. However, he only had sword abilities and was obliged to work for Butu in exchange for a prize. For numerous years, he never drew his sword except on orders from his superiors. He also did it in secret, so no one knew about his swordsmanship. Dewey was shocked to find a swordsman named Qian Renzhan, who was familiar with his sword talents. Renzhan came to Dewey's house to challenge him to a battle and put his skills to the test. Renzhan, a powerful and ambitious man, insisted on fighting Dewey despite his repeated refusal. Renzhan then gave Dewey a piece of silver as his final offering, allowing him to confront his challenge that night at the cemetery. Dewey's family ate very watery porridge in the evening since they had run out of rice to cook. After Wanyu and Ping-er fell asleep, Dewey immediately headed out to meet Renzhan's challenge. When Renzhan arrived to the cemetery, he abruptly attacked Dewey from behind, but Dewey managed to evade. The conflict started after Dewey received the silver from Renzhan. After a while of fighting, Dewey easily won the struggle and released Renzhan. Because Wanyu was ill the next day, Dewey cooked a large amount of food purchased using Renzhan's silver. Soon after, his male friend Liu Qian arrived at his home. He also bought groceries because he was aware Wanyu was unwell. Liu Qian secretly liked Wanyu, which is why he paid attention to her. Following that, Liu Qian led Dewey to take gold from a prominent merchant in the city. Although Dewey initially opposed the scheme, he eventually accepted when he realized his severely bad financial circumstances. Dewey instantly said goodbye to Wanyu and left with Liu Qian. Dewey, Lai Fi, and another man headed by Liu Qian were preparing to attack the headquarters of Chen Mantang, a wealthy trader. When they arrived at the headquarters, they quickly slipped inside. When Dewey attacked Mantang, he accidentally killed his wife. They also asked Mantang to give them all of his gold. But after the gold was given, Liu Qian stabbed Mantang in the back. The next day, Dewey buried the gold he had stolen the night before. When Dewey observed Wanyu's expression, he felt bad about his conduct. Following that tragedy, he decided to leave the hamlet with his family to start a new life in a different location. However, it was discovered that Liu Qian, who plotted the crime, intended to become an official instead. He also intended to replace Mantang as Taiping City's leading businessman. However, due to the regulations, Liu Qian was forced to sacrifice one of his 3 buddies in order to bear the punishment for killing Mantang. Dewey was sacrificed. Dewey was burying his sword in the courtyard and ready to leave the city with his family when Butu came at his house and discovered the gold that Dewey planned to carry as evidence of his crimes. As a result, Dewey was taken away and disciplined. Wanyu did not remain mute and sought Liu Qian for assistance, but she was just dissatisfied. Dewey was to be deported from Taipei City. This was what Liu Qian longed for. Even worse, Liu Qian then asked Renzhan to assassinate Dewey so that he could take Wanyu. The next day, Dewey was to fulfill his sentence while being brought to an exile facility by 2 officers. He left his wife, but Wanyu swore to remain loyal and wait for him. Renzhan abruptly attacked Dewey on the road, startling the 2 officers. Renzhan released Dewey after attacking him, despite the fact that Liu Qian had paid him. He did this because he still owed Dewey after their prior fight. During Dewey's exile, Taiping City underwent significant changes. Renzhan became the strongest duelist since no one else could beat him. Meanwhile, Liu Qian had taken over as administrator and major business owner, succeeding Mantang. Even though the deed was illegal, he was protected by the judge. After gaining office, Liu Qian proved to be worse than Mantang. He was continuously blackmailing the poor by accepting unnatural benefits. People were powerless to stop Liu Kang's cruelty because he was also protected by the local administration, resulting in anarchy throughout the city. Several shopkeepers despised him. 10 years later, Ping Er had grown up and was stunning, as was Liu Kang's son Qian. While walking downtown, the two were frequently targeted by those who despised Liu Qian, and they were attacked numerous times. Fortunately, Liu Qian arrived and assisted the two, fighting the people. Then one of the men mentioned that Man Tang was still alive. Liu Qian was taken aback by what he heard. It turned out that shortly after being stabbed, Man Tang rose again and developed a 10-year plan to get revenge on those who had murdered his family. Following that, Liu Qian went to see Wan Yu. It was well known that Liu Qian had lived through the lives of Ping Er and Wan Yu over these 10 years. He did this not out of respect for Dewey, but because he sincerely wanted to marry Wan Yu, despite being repeatedly refused. After all, Wan Yu was a wonderful woman who was devoted to her husband. On the other side, Man Tang returned with a large sum of money. He even hired Ren Zhan to help him exact revenge on Dewey, Liu Qian, and their two pals who had murdered his family and stolen his money. Dewey was also liberated from exile. He trudged over the desert towards his home, his face filled with regret. Ping Er didn't recognize him when he returned home and assumed he was a stranger. She then informed Ping Er about her mother's whereabouts. Wan Yu was astonished to see Dewey return home after 10 years apart. At night, they ate together. Dewey was astonished to see Ping Er acting so disrespectful to him, but he kept calm. Ping Er must have been deeply sad that he had abandoned her for 10 years. When Wan Yu and Dewey were in bed, Wan Yu expressed her rage at him for lying about the gold, which resulted in him being sentenced to 10 years in prison. Finally, Dewey related the events from the past, which comforted Wan Yu. However, he made no mention of killing Man Tang's wife. Dewey desired to start a new life without sword combat. The following day, Dewey met with Liu Qian. The two then ate in a store while conversing. Liu Qian stated that the current situation in the city was exceedingly chaotic, but no one dared to challenge him since Ren Zhan possessed sword skills and had been by his side the entire time. When Liu Qian mentioned Ren Zhan's name, Dewey shivered slightly since Ren Zhan had earlier threatened to murder him because someone had commanded him to. Dewey began to suspect Liu Qian, who might be behind everything. But he didn't worry about it anymore because he just wanted to go about his everyday routine silently. When Dewey arrived home, he was already waiting for Qian, who was eager to learn sword techniques from him. Man Tang and Ren Zhan, on the other hand, had already begun to exact their revenge. The first person they targeted was Lai Fei. After being apprehended, he and his family were executed on the spot. Soon after, Liu Qian learned of Lai Fei's and his family's deaths. As it turned out, Liu Qian was also expecting horrible things to happen, because he had been living a nice and opulent life for 10 years. He still wanted to fight for what he had now, counting on Dewey. Man Tang submitted a written proclamation threatening Liu Qian, specifically Dewey. When Dewey saw the threatening note, he promptly prepared to go to Liu Qian's house and collect the promised riches. In the evening, Liu Qian went to Dewey's house. Just as Dewey was going to accept the gold and depart Taiping City, Liu Qian forced him to confront Man Tang. Dewey denied the request until Liu Qian reminded him that he had murdered Man Tang's wife. Wan Yu was quite unhappy when he heard this. Wan Yu then begged Dewey to take responsibility for his actions. Dewey then left, carrying Liu Qian's gold. Despite the fact that Dewey was likely to assist him against Man Tang, Liu Qian attempted to request assistance from Bu Tu in sending forces to assist him. However, Bu Tu ignored Liu Qian and abandoned him. After several nights, Wan Yu encouraged Dewey to prepare to battle Man Tang, seeing that the sword was inextricably linked to Dewey's destiny. Liu Qian then declared a competition in public. Anyone who could help him overcome Man Tang would be rewarded with a large sum of gold. It came out that among the swarm of locals was a man named Tian Yidao, Man Tang's deputy. At night, Yidao attempted to steal Liu Qian's wealth but was apprehended and imprisoned. Liu Qian, unsure about his forces against Man Tang, decided to enlist Yidao. He asked him to execute a surprise attack on Man Tang in exchange for the gold he intended to steal. Liu Qian's army, led by his ally Go Meng, suffered a major defeat as a result of Yidao's betrayal. After that, Liu Qian was perplexed about confronting Man Tang's rage and vengeance. Finally, he considered fleeing Taiping City and the person who was going to kill him. Meanwhile, Liu Qian, who possessed below-average swordsmanship ability, believed that relying solely on Dewey would be stupid. Surprisingly, Liu Qian found time to visit Dewey's mansion and request that Wan Yu accompany him on his escape. Unbeknownst to Liu Qian, Dewey was on a nearby hill instructing Qian's swordsmanship. With no one at home, Liu Qian wanted to do the unthinkable to Wan Yu. Fortunately, Dewey and Qian returned home soon after. Qian was astounded to observe his father's harsh behavior toward Wan Yu. Dewey initially remained cool, but then asked Qian and his wife to leave the house. However, his rage spilled and he instantly attacked Liu Qian. During their fight, Liu Qian reminded him that Man Tang would follow him wherever he went. As a result, Dewey came to realize that Liu Qian had taken Wan Yu and Ping Er to ensure their safety. However, Wan Yu unexpectedly entered the house and decided to accompany Dewey until the end of his life. In the end, Ping Er only accompanied Qian and Liu Qian, while Dewey faced Man Tang and his men alone. After that, he exhumed his master's sword, which had been buried for 10 years. On the way, Qian decided to return and assist Dewey. Liu Qian eventually opted to return because he was concerned about Qian and wanted to accept responsibility for his faults. Wan Yu was bringing her husband out from Dewey's residence to confront Man Tang, trying to ensure his safety. On the other hand, Man Tang and his army, which included Renzan, were already prepared to battle Dewey. After that, Qian arrived to battle with him. In the midst of the conflict, Man Tang told Renzan to attack right away, but Renzan begged him to wait. Man Tang became disturbed and started to confront Dewey, who was struggling against his troops. Renzan suddenly stabbed Man Tang in the back. While confronting Yi Dao, Qian was confused. However, Qian received assistance from Liu Qian. After some battling, Yi Dao was slain by Liu Qian's stab. Renzan attacked Liu Qian from behind and severed Qian's neck. The last combat is between Renzan and Dewey. After a while, there was a tremendous battle, and Renzan died while Dewey was gravely hurt as they attacked each other with their swords. Wan Yu quickly arrived to see how Dewey was doing. She was devastated to discover he was dying. Dewey finally died in Wan Yu's arms. The moral of this film is that fights are harmful to both sides.